Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates Morning Show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. Yes, I'm Julien Skeete, and it feels so good to be back on set, connecting with you here at the Tobago Updates Morning Show. In this segment, we start the conversation chatting with Shermin Joy Charles, Behavioral Services Officer, Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program. And in case you can't remember all that, yep, it's ADAPP. And we're going to be finding out a little bit more about this entity within the Tobago House of Assembly. Good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
All right, so we're going to get the conversation started immediately. Tell us a little bit about ADAPP and the respective division within which this operation falls in the Tobago House of Assembly.
Okay, so ADAPP is a is a unit within the Division of Health, Wellness, and Social Protection. So we are basically in charge of drug prevention education in Tobago. So we go about giving persons the necessary information needed to make informed choices about their substance use.
All right, so as we speak to this issue, tell us, you know, in growing up, you've had the comparative where I tell people we've gone through phases where HIV and AIDS was the popular and going thing, so notwithstanding that it remains, it's not as popular in terms of the talk thing. Drugs would have been one of our serious issues in relation to the blocks and so on. I want to start with a perspective as to where have we come from and bring us up to speed in terms of where we at now, in terms of the statistics and so on with reaching out.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go back to when I started at ADAPP, which has been 10 years ago. So at that point in time, the main drug that was being used was actually alcohol. So we had a lot of persons who were coming for issues with alcohol use. The period around that time is where everything is a reason to drink. So we have christenings, funerals, everything is a reason to drink. But as the years progressed, we realized now we have a main issue with marijuana. So not only do we have a main issue with marijuana, we have persons who are using at a younger age. So while you may have found persons using in the late half of their high school experience, we realize that persons are starting at an earlier age between 13 and 15 years old. So that is what is happening in Tobago in regards to substance use.
How has the changes with the laws affected the good, bad, manageable? Because I don't know, I think there's a higher demand for stuff when it's against, it's illegal.
Yes.
Versus how has that affected things for us, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, where we had some changes with the law for allowances?
So surprisingly, we have not seen any major decline or any major increase in regards to the marijuana use. What we have seen, though, I think it's because of COVID, where you have a lot of persons using more marijuana. And as we've come out of that COVID period where persons are going back into work, we see persons using less. But generally, has there been a change since the decriminalization? No, there hasn't been a change. It's basically been the same.
Tell us, in terms of the response, particularly with in the high school age, access, challenge, people are there opportunities for being able to educate and inform? Tell us a little bit about the outreach efforts in relation to that.
So we have been able to go out into the high schools. So we were targeting a few high schools just before COVID, and as COVID has we've come out of that COVID experience, we're trying to restart those programs. So we had a program called Project Alert, where we go into the secondary schools and we sort of give children necessary life skills needed to resist substance use. Right now, we have not been able to go back into that school. We still have to negotiate with education as persons are getting out of that COVID area. What we are currently targeting is those students at the Learning and Enrichment Center. So we'll normally go up there once per week and usually do sessions related to substance use prevention.
Tell us a little bit as well about your community outreach efforts, NGOs and those entities beyond just the educational institutions, because I know in reality, if we're speaking to really being able to get to that point, we're looking at the community as a whole, all possible elements.
And one of our community initiatives is a health center initiatives. So we go into the health centers once per week, and we normally would have sessions there. We're looking to revamp the health center initiative. So just instead of going into it and doing a session and leaving, we're hoping that we can stay there for the day. So persons who may have additional questions, who may feel as though they have an issue, who may want to refer a family member, they can always come to us, because what we realize is we're hardly going to get persons to come into the office in Glen Road. So we have to go out there and meet them. So that is one of the initiatives that we want to revamp. It's a health center initiative to go there more often and stay there for a longer period of time.
How do we treat with the traditional views and perspectives that churches and persons in, those places or various religions and spaces don't necessarily need this kind of information, but sometimes the reality is, whether we want to face it or not,
Yes.
We've got some trouble happening there. How do you overcome that kind of challenge in terms of reaching out there?
So I know before, when our former manager, Billy Sterling Lewis, she had a idea to do a faith-based initiative. So one of our stakeholders has actually been those faith-based organizations and churches. And they have really come to the realization that, yes, listen, we do have an issue in the churches and we need to get help. So what happens is, usually they would normally send letters of requests for the unit to come and do sessions. But I do agree with you that we have to go out there in some way and figure out how do we reach those churches. Because while some churches may be more willing to access the information, some persons are a little bit ticklish because, they don't want to come, and then persons actually start to use more than they necessarily use. So that is something that we could try to work towards for the next fiscal year.
It's like the typical parent that's probably still in denial that your child is doing adult stuff, even without your consent. The other area I want us to touch on, when we speak to alcohol and drug abuse, what's your general response, particularly looking at that broader community? Let's speak to now the blocks and those efforts out there. As I like to say, the unconventional organization that happens in our community spaces.
Yes, and I think 2 weeks ago we had a conversation with our communications unit, and that how do we target these people? Because sometimes we're very afraid to go into the blocks. The truth is that we did have a program there. I think it was Take It to the People. A former staff member, Pastor Bacchus, he was the one who led that initiative. So we'll go on the box and we'll talk to these people. The truth is that sometimes it could be very difficult, because they've already had their perception about what substance use is, and they don't think it necessarily affects them. So what we actually have to do is go in and form relationships with these people. So it's not just passing in every now and then and check it in and just give them, talk to them, find out what is the reason why they're using, because a lot of times if we deal with the reasons why they're using, then the use will not become a problem. So that is something, again, that we have to really focus on. How do we get into them? And I think one of the main areas is just to form relationships and friendships with these people.
Some of them, depending on the time when you go there too, they might already be operating on a higher frequency. I want you to tell us, I know we're speaking to the governmental agency and the role that you play, but tell us a little bit about the role in terms of the communities. Very often people tend to think they have to do something for that, but what role does the community play here in the mix? Because I know by virtue of staffing, no matter how much you have, it's impossible to be everywhere in and around as you're supposed to. And what do you anticipate is that follow-up role that you hope the community plays in terms of really trying to manage this situation?
So I think one of the main things we're asking for communities is to have a community that does not promote substance use. And it's going to be hard, because the truth is a lot of persons who are using substances, and a lot of persons who are selling these substances are persons who help out in the community. So we're having a battle where some community members and some community leaders and groups are not so inclined to push that narrative. But I think what's important is that they actually push that narrative, because we can give all the information and do all the sessions, but these are where the people live. So we need to make sure that the drugs are not easily accessible. Even a small thing like a wake or a harvest, when you have these alcohols and stuff, you make sure that, listen, if you're looking at a certain age, I'm not going to give it to you. Don't get it so accessible. And also to have a space where persons can come to you. And, communities may not be able to offer the necessary intervention in regards to treatment, but at least they should be able to direct persons. This is where you have to go. This is where you have to go. So in the communities, even though they may not be able to do what we are doing, what they need to do is support. So if persons need help, support. Encourage an environment where we are not going to promote substance use, and we're not going to encourage substances to be so accessible.
Very quickly before we wrap this morning, contact information for persons who want wanting to reach out because they're hearing you talking about the church, the community,
Yes.
the blocks, etc. And they're probably saying, wow, I didn't know I could just call them to come in.
Yeah.
Tell us about how do they get in contact and where can they find you for those who want to actually come in.
Okay, so we are at number 5 Montezuri Drive, Glenwood, Scarborough. That's the new building in the back by where E-Zone is and community development is. And if you want to contact us, so you can call the office number at 639-3395. The extensions are 47075 or 47076, or you can call directly. I have a work cell number. It's 487-6665.
All right. Closing comments, final 30 seconds before we wrap this one. What's the message you want to leave there?
One of the message I want to leave there is that even if you're using, it's not a hopeless case. And for those persons who are using, there is help. You can contact us to get help. And for those persons who have not used, we want to encourage you to continue not using.
And you know, I've got to connect it. Interesting enough, we've got our next guest coming on, and that's none other than the man himself, Collis Hayes. In fact, interesting enough, I met one of his officers over the course of this weekend conversation, and the officer said in response, under the circumstances, they said, you know, one of the things I like is that he's a community man, and he believes in community policing. How do you see that connecting governmental agency, the police, in really working to continue to reach out to the communities?
Yes, and as we told Mr. Hayes, I must commend the Roxwood Police Crew Club because they are one of our partners who is always there. They also have an initiative, the Youth Against Marijuana Initiative, and they are one that pushed that narrative also. So I think Mr. Hayes and the group is one of those persons one of those individuals that I will look forward to see, you know, this is what we want. This is the standard we want to push a narrative of we are not promoting substance use.
All right. Quick question at the end. Do you feel children using drugs is because of adults using or making it seem cool?
I think it's both. It's both because they think it's cool. So their friends around them, and at certain age, your peers are most important. So they think it's cool. But when you have family members who are using, then you don't have that other side that tells you, okay, this may be wrong. So it's a combination of both.
All right. Thank you very much again. Shermin Joy Charles, Behavioral Services Officer, Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program, joining us here on set this morning at the Tobago Updates Morning Show. Viewers, we want to thank you so much for the continued love and support and for choosing the Tobago Updates Morning Show. As we see coming up next on set, what they call it, the community policing man. That is what he about. Collis Hayes, the Assistant Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We look forward to the conversations coming up next. Viewers, we want to remind you, those of you joining us via TV, those listening in on the radio, and those of you connecting with us online, this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.